Have you ever apologised to your child, then spent the next 3 days replaying the moment in your mind? Have you ever sat at work wondering if you should be at home, only to be at home wondering if you should be working? Have you ever taken 10 minutes for yourself and then felt guilty for taking that time out? If you're a mother, chances are you've experienced guilt. But here's the question that I've been asking myself lately. Why? Why does this emotion seem inseparable to motherhood? Is it because we're failing, or is there something much deeper happening? This is what I want to explore in this episode. Guilt is rarely a random feeling, trivial or felt at surface level when it comes to motherhood. What many mothers experience is a layered emotional response shaped by biology, psychology, and culture, but all interacting at once. Understanding our biology is a good place to start because understanding why our brains respond the way they do changes everything. At the most foundational level, motherhood awakens a powerful biological drive. Humans are wired for love, attachment, and caregiving, and this is particularly so during pregnancy and in the early years of a child's life. Hormonal changes, including increases in oxytocin and prolactin, don't simply help us bond with our babies, but they heighten our sensitivity to their needs and increase our vigilance. In many ways, our biology prepares us to become exquisitely attuned to another human being. A mother who quickly notices a change in her baby's cry, behaviour or environment is more likely to respond in ways that protect her child. A mother's brain is designed to constantly ask two questions. First of all, is my child safe? And secondly, is there anything I need to do? And this is where deep attachment and the protective brain meet. The stronger the attachment to our children, the higher the emotional stakes become. Our desire to meet our baby's needs becomes our primary focus. And for many mothers, it will be the deepest love that they will ever experience. And because the relationship matters so profoundly, even the smallest moments of perceived disconnection, a rush goodbye, losing our patience, returning to work, missing a school event, all of these things can feel emotionally significant. It is not uncommon for us to become so afraid of falling short, letting our children down or failing in some ways that we begin to confuse the feeling of guilt with that of the feeling of love. We unconsciously reason that if we keep questioning ourselves, worrying, carrying guilt, it must mean we care deeply, right? There is also another important piece to this puzzle, though. The maternal brain becomes more responsive to potential risk. Research suggests that brain networks involved in detecting threats, reading emotional cues, and anticipating the needs of others becomes way more active in motherhood. The challenge is that the brain doesn't scan equally for what is going well compared to what could be improved. And like all humans, the maternal brain has what's known as a negativity bias. It naturally gives greater weight to perceived mistakes, threats, problems than to everyday moments of safety and connection. In other words, it notices that one difficult interaction far more readily than the hundreds of ordinary loving moments that came before it. And that is why mothers vividly remember the one time they lost their patience while barely noticing the countless times they responded with warmth, comfort, and presence. When your mind repeatedly focuses on what you might have forgotten, where you could have done better, or whether you've made the right decision, it isn't necessarily because you're failing. It's because your beautiful protective brain has been designed to look for gaps before it looks for successes. And understanding this doesn't eliminate guilt, but it does help us to hold it and see it differently. Not every guilty feeling is an accurate reflection of reality. Your maternal brain was designed to notice what might go wrong, not to constantly remind you of everything that's going right. The problem isn't that our brains are faulty. It's that a brain designed for survival now finds itself trying to navigate a world that asks mothers to be endlessly available. Biology is only one layer. The next layer is psychological. Motherhood doesn't just change what you do, it changes who you believe you need to be. Becoming a mother doesn't simply add another role to your life, it reshapes your entire identity. Before mothers, your decisions primarily affected you, right? But almost overnight, another human's survival, well-being, and development can become intimately connected to every choice you make. From the shift from me to we is really quite a profound one. And with that shift comes something many women have never experienced before: an extraordinary sense of responsibility for another human being. Now, responsibility itself isn't the problem. Babies genuinely depend on us, and we know that. Young children need our protection, guidance, and care in ways that few other relationships have ever demanded. But psychologically, something subtle can begin to happen. The healthy responsibility of caring for a child can quietly progress into the belief that we are responsible for everything, not just for feeding our babies and keeping them safe, but for their happiness, their confidence, their friendships, their emotional well-being, their future, their choices, even the adults that they will become one day. Without realizing it, we begin carrying responsibilities that no human being was ever designed to carry. Care slowly becomes control, commitment becomes perfection, love becomes performance. And somewhere along the way, we stop asking, what does my child need from me? And start asking, what kind of mother do I have to be? The onus then turns inward on the mother. Because once we decide that motherhood is something we must perform well, every difficult moment begins to feel like evidence that we're getting it wrong. Losing our patience isn't just losing our patience, it becomes proof we're failing. Needing a break isn't simply being human, it becomes proof that we're not devoted enough. Forgetting something isn't just forgetfulness, it becomes proof that we're not coping. This is where guilt begins to shift from an occasional emotion into now a way of evaluating ourselves. And part of the reason this happens is because mother offers very little certainty. Unlike school, there's no report card. Unlike careers, there's no performance review. No objective measure that tells you you're doing enough, you're good enough. But here's the truth. Every child is different. Every family is different. Every season of parenting asks something new of us. The target is constantly moving. And this is where it becomes incompatible with the human brain. The maternal brain craves certainty. Uncertainty can feel deeply uncomfortable because our brains naturally associate the unknown with potential risk. So when there is no external benchmark, many mothers instinctively create one internally. We begin measuring ourselves. Am I patient enough? Am I present enough? Am I doing this right? And underneath every one of those questions sits the one that quietly shapes so much of our maternal guilt. Am I enough? But here's what I find so fascinating. Guilt often becomes the mind's attempt to solve uncertainty. We unconsciously believe that if we think about motherhood hard enough, analyze every interaction, replay every conversation, and question every decision, eventually we'll arrive at certainty. We'll finally know we've done enough, reached the mark. Certainty is something motherhood can never truly offer. But what if the antidote to maternal guilt isn't certainty? What if instead it's self-trust, the quiet confidence that says, I won't get everything right, I will make mistakes, I will repair them when I need to, and I can still trust myself to be the mother my child needs, because the goal of motherhood was never perfection. What if the goal was always relationship? Now, I'd understand if you questioned at this point, why does it still feel impossible even when I'm trying so hard? That's because there is another layer that quietly influences almost every mother, whether she realizes it or not. It's culture. The world we mother in shapes the way we think about ourselves just as much as our biology and psychology does. Every generation of mothers has faced different expectations. But today's mothers are navigating an unprecedented number of voices telling them what good motherhood basically should look like. Open social media and you'll quickly find opposing opinions on almost everything. Breastfeed, but don't breastfeed too long. Go back to work, but don't miss your children's milestones. Stay home, but don't lose your ambition. Be emotionally available. Be financially independent. Be patient. Be productive. Prioritize your children, but don't lose yourself. Raise resilient children. Protect them from every disappointment. Feed them organic food. Limit screens. Encourage independence. Be present, exercise, sleep, meditate, date your partner, build a career, maintain friendships, look after your aging parents, and somehow enjoy every moment because they grow up so fast. The problem isn't that any one of these expectations is unreasonable on its own. The problem is that together they become impossible. Modern mothers are often expected to excel simultaneously in roles that were never designed to be carried by one single person all at once. So no matter what decision a mother makes, there is often perceived a cost somewhere else. She will always feel like as though she is failing in some area. If she works, she may feel guilty for not contributing. If she works, she may feel guilty for not being at home. If she stays home, she may feel guilty for not contributing financially or pursuing her career. If she rests, she worries she's not doing enough, or even I've heard women say they're lazy. If she keeps pushing, she wonders why she's so exhausted. It's almost as though motherhood has become a never-ending exercise in choosing which version of guilt to live with. And social media has only amplified this experience. For the first time in history, mothers are no longer comparing themselves to a handful of women in their immediate community. They're comparing themselves to thousands of carefully curated snapshots of motherhood every single day. One mother is baking sourdough with her children. Another is running a successful business from home. Another is homeschooling. Another is traveling the world with toddlers. Another appears endlessly calm, organised at present. We know intellectually that these are curated moments rather than complete realities. But comparison quietly becomes self-evaluation, and self-evaluation can very much shift into guilt. Perhaps one of the greatest acts of self-compassion is recognizing that much of this maternal guilt isn't born from personal failure. It is born from trying to meet the expectations that no human could possibly fulfill. Instead of asking, why can't I do it all? We begin asking, who decided I was supposed to? That question doesn't lower our standards as mothers. It simply allows us to replace impossible expectations with intentional values. Because our children don't need us to meet every cultural expectation. They need us to live according to what matters most to our family. And where do most of those expectations come from? Some come from modern culture, but many were handed to us long before social media existed. They were inherited from the women who came before us. So, if biology lays the foundation and psychology explains how guilt develops, then our personal history often determines what we feel guilty about. And this brings us to the generational layers, because none of us begin motherhood with a blank slate. Long before we ever hold our baby, we've spent decades quietly collecting data about what a good mother is supposed to be. We've watched our mothers, grandmothers, aunts, women in our communities, the mothers in films, books, advertisements. Without even realising it, we've built an internal blueprint of motherhood. And most of those beliefs weren't consciously chosen, they were absorbed. Maybe you grew up believing that a good mother always puts everyone else's needs before her own. Maybe you learnt that asking for help was a sign of weakness. Whatever your experience, it shapes something, because children don't just observe their families, they learn from them. And not just how to behave, but what love looks like, what safety feels like, what conflict means, whether needs are welcomed or dismissed, whether mistakes are allowed, whether worth is something we simply possess or something we have to earn. Then something extraordinary happens. You become a mother, and suddenly you aren't just raising a child, you are revisiting your own experience of being one. Motherhood has a remarkable way of awakening parts of ourselves that we didn't even realise were still there. A toddler's tantrum may remind us of how our emotions were responded to. Our child's need for comfort may stir feelings and memories of times that we long to be comforted ourselves. Setting a boundary with our children may feel uncomfortable because somewhere deep inside us, saying no once felt unsafe. This is why many people refer to this as the inner child. Not a separate person living inside of us, but the younger parts of ourselves that still carry early beliefs, emotional memories, and protective strategies. These parts often become surprisingly active during motherhood because parenting constantly brings us face to face with the very experiences that shaped us. This is why maternal guilt is sometimes far more complex than it first appears. A mother may feel guilty for taking an afternoon to herself, not because her children are suffering, but because she inherited the belief that love must always look like complete and utter self-sacrifice. She may feel guilty for setting healthy boundaries, not because the boundaries were harmful, but because her younger self learned that pleasing others was the safest way to belong. She may feel guilty for making different choices from her mother, not because her choices are wrong, but because breaking a family pattern often feels uncomfortable before it feels freeing. For many mothers, guilt isn't simply saying you're doing something wrong, it's saying you're doing something differently. And this isn't about blaming our parents. Most parents were doing the very best they can or could with what they had. But every generation also has the opportunity to become more aware, to gently examine the beliefs that we've inherited, and to hold on to the ones that still serve us, and to lovingly release the ones that no longer align with the kind of mother we want to be. It's a mother who is willing to become conscious of her own story so she doesn't have to keep unconsciously repeating it. In that sense, motherhood becomes more than raising the next generation. It becomes an invitation to heal her own. But here's the question that changed everything for me. What if guilt isn't the problem? What if instead of believing that we are getting it wrong, we invite curiosity? Instead of asking, why do I feel guilty? Ask, what is this guilt trying to tell me? Whenever guilt appears, I invite you to pause and ask yourself, did I contradict one of my values, or did I contradict someone else's expectation? That's a huge difference. Is this about today, or is it touching an older story, perhaps a time in my early childhood? Do I actually need to repair something, or do I just need rest? Could it be telling you that your nervous system is depleted rather than presuming it's a moral failure? At this point in the conversation, I'd like to let you know that I've created a PDF walking you through 5 steps in learning how to reframe guilt in a healthy, grounded way. To gain access to this information, press the link in the show notes and it will be sent straight to your email. If you're listening to this, dear mother, and you've been carrying guilt for years, wondering whether you're enough, I hope this conversation has helped you see something. Your guilt is not proof that you're failing. It's proof that you care. Carrying and caring are not the same thing. You can care deeply without carrying every disappointment. You can care deeply without believing every difficult moment defines you. You can care deeply without making guilt your identity, because guilt was never meant to be the voice that raises your children. Say that again. Because guilt was never meant to become the voice that raises your children. Your values raise them. Your repairs will raise them. Your present will raise them. Your humanity will raise them. And perhaps the greatest gift we can give our children isn't showing them what a perfect mother looks like. It's showing them what a self-trusting one looks like. So the next time guilt visits, and it probably will because you're human, I hope you don't immediately believe everything it has to say. I hope you'll pause, become curious, ask where it's come from, ask what it's trying to protect, ask whether it's pointing you towards one of your values or towards an impossible expectation. Because guilt isn't always asking you to become a better mother. Sometimes it's asking you to become a kinder one towards yourself. And maybe that's where healing begins. Not by never feeling guilt again, but by no longer letting it decide who you are. I'd like to share a concluding thought to ponder. The love you have for your child is no doubt undeniable. Love raises children, but guilt simply convinces us that love isn't enough. I invite you to share your thoughts with me on socials, and thank you for spending this time with me today. If you're enjoying this podcast, I'd be grateful if you could follow, share, or review, and thank you for supporting the Postpartum is Forever podcast. I trust that you enjoyed this episode. Postpartum is Forever is a podcast that is focused on honouring the mother. My wish for you is that you feel more aware, less alone, more empowered, and a whole lot kinder to yourself in your mothering. Your support means the world to me, and so I would be grateful if you could follow me on my Instagram page, Postpartum is Forever podcast, and share this podcast on your socials. Rate and review this podcast on whatever platform you're listening from, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Big love.